Going in, and we shall begin. Oh, and Sheila, yes, lovely to see you. I do remember seeing you last month, I believe. Thanks for joining in. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for joining in this Ayurveda Psychology and Ayurveda Trauma Healing Workshop series. We've been joining at the first Wednesday of every month here live to talk about Ayurveda and healing the connection between mind and body um, through spiritual practice and through tangible, practical steps of self-care and balancing our uh, body-mind constitution, our psycho-emotional inclinations and tendencies and constitution of our physical and mental emotional being. So we are here this month. Let me just give you a little bit of context to where we are. So over the last several months, since January, February of this year, we've been kind of zooming out, just conversing and diving into various topics in this under this massive umbrella of Ayurvedic psychology and emotional healing work. And we say that these classes are particularly suited for yogis, yoginis, people on the spiritual path who also might consider themselves empaths or have highly sensitive nervous systems, or as someone who just wants to deepen their study in these topics. But usually there's a really personal relationship that we have to, like, okay, how do we regulate our nervous system? How do we not experience the overwhelming triggers from the outside world, and how do we not allow the energies and emotions of others and of really challenging events that are happening in the world consume our psyche and consume our nervous system? And then on a practical sense, how do we move from a place of inner harmony that feels like it's in alignment with our true being, and despite whatever traumas we've experienced or influences from childhood or past experiences that were challenging, painful, hurtful. And Ayurveda looks at the physical body as a crystallization of the mind. And so there's absolutely no separation between the two. And so today we're going to get into these topics. Earlier in the week, the late winter into spring in the northern hemisphere, so February through like May, we were really talking a lot about the tangible physical practices around balancing, how to optimize your digestion and the connection around diet and nutrition to regulate the nervous system, physical body practices to regulate the nervous system, create safety in a physical way, which is very important foundation to emotional healing work, to trauma healing work, or just simply to optimizing your higher nature and your connection to your spiritual self through the medium of the mind being an interface between lower consciousness and higher consciousness, or lower nature and higher nature. So we'll be talking about all these things. But earlier we were talking a lot about the physical, and then starting the last couple of months, including this month, excuse me, we're starting to go a little bit more into the subtle realms. And last class, we started talking more about mantra, and we chanted some mantras together. And we talked about how to condition the mind through mantra and kind of returning to this essence, this vibrational essence, which is the very fabric of our existence, more of our spiritual existence, which is beyond the physical pain and suffering of the material existence. So we talked about how practices that you could bring into your daily life to do that. So if you're watching this as a recording, you're watching this on my YouTube channel, and all of the other recordings are on there. And if you're here with me live, then just know that you can always go back and revisit my YouTube channel and go through any of the past workshops that built up to today's topic. And then even last year, we started this series last year, and we talked about the antakarana, this energetic organ that you didn't know you had, which is really beyond just the mind. It's the whole process of taking in experience and information and sensory input and digesting it to make sense. It's like how you perceive the world through this organ that is more vast and complex in a beautiful way than just what we know as mind. So a lot of those Ayurvedic psychology foundations can all be found in those previously recorded live workshops. Just an FYI for context of where we are today. And then today we're going to talk a little bit more, touching more upon, we're always talking about all the topics because you can't totally pull them apart. And this isn't healing, especially trauma healing or, advancing in your spiritual path through, really releasing samskaras and, having the healthiest mind-body complex as possible. You can never dissect. It's not linear, and you can never pull these things apart, so to speak. So we always kind of bridge all aspects of this truly holistic approach. But today we will talk a little bit more about some of the emotional practices and just some kind of perspectives and things that you can take away from this session today as reminders and practical, pragmatic, like things to do outside of this educational, informational session that you can take into your day-to-day life and explore more, go into more deeply, or just apply straight from this workshop. So I like these workshops to be a bit experiential and educational and practical. So we will start today with a little bit of breath work, some basic breath work to help you really arrive and drop into your body and support the pathways of healing to dilate and open and relax. And it also really allows us, our consciousness to be more fully present. And we'll do these practices as I guide you through the practices. These are also an embodied way to learn the practices that you could be doing every day, ideally between monthly sessions, and then we check back in next month, do the practices again together in community, and then go deeper into the next topic. If any of you feel the need to, this is because there's a format in a group and it's like educational, kind of open to the greater community. If any of this appeals to you and you are trying to understand more deeply how it relates to your own unique circumstance, please just email me, reach out to me, ask me, share with me. I always have a few one-on-one spots kind of open and available for all of you. So please just reach out and let me know that you're needing support or that you have, something that you're working through and that you want insight on. And you can always email me, hello@alicialyndiaz.com. That's the email. All right. I'll remind you again that at the end. So let us begin first with a little bit of practice, opening up, and then as usual, every month we do this little breath work, this pranayam, and a mantra practice, a gentle mantra practice, and then I will read our this month's poetic meditation in Sanskrit and English, and we'll have a moment of silence just for contemplation on that topic, and then we'll get into today's educational portion and topic. Sound good? All right. So beginning by taking a few deep breaths in, and if it feels comfortable, you can close your eyes or turn your gaze downward just to help your awareness tune within. And bringing your awareness down to the lower belly, And you start to relax the belly. You can even place your hands onto the belly. And as you inhale, you should feel the belly soften. So a lot of times in our modern society, we do the opposite. We suck our belly in when we take a breath. But instead today, you want to relax the lower part of the belly where you can actually get all of that oxygen and stretch relaxation into the diaphragm. So as you inhale, belly softens and expands towards your hands. And as you exhale, navel draws towards the spine, contracts in, pushing the air out. As you inhale, belly relaxes, softens, invites a more full breath in. And as you exhale, contract, navel moves towards the spine. And with every exhale, try to make it a little bit longer so that your inhale naturally becomes fuller and more relaxed without forcing. So exhale becomes a little bit longer, a little bit longer. And then the inhale naturally becomes softer and fuller. And do a couple more breaths just on your own rhythm and pace. Good, and next we'll transition into three-part breath. So first you just start with relaxing the belly, bringing the breath down, softening the belly. Now we're going to move up to the ribs and up to the chest. So in three parts. So you begin by sipping air into the lower belly, expanding, then up in the middle ribs, then the upper chest. And then you exhale from chest, ribs, and belly. So it's like filling a pitcher of water from bottom to top and then emptying it from top to bottom. So first we'll start with three separate parts so you can get the distinction. Go ahead and exhale all your air out. Now breathe into the lower belly. Inhale. Sip air in. Now inhale to the middle ribs, expanding the rib cage out, and then inhale into the upper chest. Good. Now exhale, ribs come in, belly pulls in. And that's all three parts. Go ahead and inhale from belly, sipping into ribs, up to chest. Exhale from chest, now ribs and belly. One more, sipping in from belly, now ribs, chest, exhale, chest, and ribs, and belly. And now inhaling smoothly all three parts. Inhaling belly, ribs, chest, and exhaling chest, ribs, belly. Good. Inhaling belly, ribs, chest as full of a breath as you've ever felt, expanding in all directions. And then exhaling chest, ribs, and belly. Again, one more nice big smooth breath. Belly, ribs, chest. Pause at the top of the inhale. Exhale, chest, ribs, belly. Pausing at the bottom of the exhale. Now at your own pace, do a few more breaths, really expanding as long and slow as you can, and really hanging out at that top and the bottom. Luxuriating in the fullness and the emptiness of the breath. Good. And then release. Return your hands to your lap. Take a moment of pause and simply notice. Beautiful. And then the next breath practice is a version of Brahmari Pranayama, which is translated as the bee humming breath. We're not going to do the full practice because it's not appropriate for everyone at every time. So the full practice would be you close your ears. And in this one, we're just going to do the humming sound. So it's very similar. You're making a humming sound like the buzz of life itself, like the buzz of the honeybee moving from flower to flower. This is very much connected to the cosmic sound Om that helps us remember the return to our essence, our true nature as spirit embodied. So it's very soothing and calming to the nervous system. And we'll practice this breath 3 times with the full kind of 3-part inhale. So you'll do a full inhale just like we just practiced, but on the exhale, as you empty the lungs, you're going to make a humming sound in your throat, and your lips stay closed for this. Tongue kind of presses to the roof of the mouth as you feel this humming sound fill your head, and then it moves down into your body. So we'll do 3 long, slow humming breaths on your exhales, and then pause and take a moment of noticing. So to begin, go ahead and exhale all your air out, emptying the lungs. Good. And take a full deep inhale from belly, ribs, and chest, and then exhale 3 times with a nice long hum. Pause and notice. I love that practice so much. Sometimes it's hard to come back, especially when you do the full practice of this one, which is closing your ears and holding the marma points along the midline of your face. You are all welcome to look up this practice in terms of researching it more fully. It's mostly just not appropriate for someone who just had surgery or who has an active headache, or especially any kind of procedures done to the eyes or ears. And then a female who's menstruating shouldn't do any pranayam, typically, including this one. But this practice, the full practice, is actually very supportive for, this would be, if I had to give you one practice for regulating your nervous system every day, that was energetic, that didn't have to do with like, you know, food and sleep and all those basics, it would be this practice of Brahmari Pranayam. It balances the neurotransmitters in the body. It balances the hormones in the body. It actually, leading into this class today, most of you probably saw the posts or the email that I wrote about emotional thermostat. So the emotional thermostat, this particular practice supports the regulation of your emotional thermostat to not identify with the massive highs and lows and fluctuations of moods. It actually helps, you still have fluctuations of mood and emotion because you're human, but there's like less of an identification with those highs and lows, and there's a little bit more physiological, neurological kind of stability within those waves when you practice Brahmari Pranayama regularly. And Linda, you asked the spelling. So here, Brahmari Pranayama, Brahmari, Brahmari. And then Maria asks, is there a limit on how often the humming breath should be repeated? This is a great question. So the one that we're doing together here without closing the ears, just the long hum, it is safe to practice that all day long, every day. Like there's no limit. In fact, doing that with a gentle hum really would keep you very mindful to your breath. And because there's a sound and a feeling, you actually are very cognizant of the length of your breath and you breathe very mindfully. So you could be doing a hum like that, through many daily activities, other than ones that you need to breathe as your heart rate is up. So that practice is fine to do for a long time, anytime. If you're practicing full Brahmari Pranayama, where you're holding the ears closed, this you want to do no more than 7 breaths in one sitting. So 7 breaths in one sitting, and you do that every single day, again, except for when you're menstruating or have any of the other contraindications I listed earlier, reasons that you shouldn't do this practice. And the progression with this typically is, as taught by Dr. Vasant Lad, you do 7 breaths every day for a week or more, but you have to do every day for a week or more. And then the next week or so, you can increase by 1. So you can go to 8 breaths in one sitting. So you do 8 breaths every day for at least 1 week. And then you can go to 9 the next week, and so on and so on and so on. And that can take as long as you need. But you never do more than 17 breaths in one sitting. That's the max for this practice. And it is a progression, just like weightlifting is a progression. Some people, it takes longer to progress. Some people their bodies adapt sooner. So you just know if you ever feel, too lightheaded, or like it's mostly a lightheadedness that would happen, that you would know, oh, I did a little too much, and then you just do less. So therapeutically, you can do those breaths 7 times in one seating each day, just once a day. And that's your medicine that you take every day. is Brahmari Pranayama. Great. Thank you for asking questions. I love it. I love hearing from you. Okay, I usually don't talk so much in the middle of our practice, but I guess that wanted to be shared. So the next practice we'll do is, it's similar to Udgit Pranayama. We're just going to call this the mantra breath. So we're not going to do the full practice, but it's a very similar. It's basically the mantra breath is chanting Hari Om over and over. We'll do it just 3 times together so you can get a feel for it. But this practice you can do every day as well for as long as feels right. You can set a timer for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, just chanting Hari Om. And there are definitely spiritual, like this is Hari is one of the names of the divine, of God. But also energetically, as it was taught to me through my yoga lineage, the syllables Hari, Om, Ha, Ri, and Om are also moving energy in your body. So Ha, the sound Ha, if you make that sound with me right now and just say Ha, where do you feel it in your body? Ha. You feel it down kind of like in the navel, solar plexus area. To make that sound Ha, you kind of have to contract your belly, right? So the energy, moves there, Ha, and then the energy of Ri circulates the energy up the spine, and then Om circulates it through all the, from basically it's like a circular, all parts of it bathes all parts of your brain from the back to the front. And it helps awaken and open those the faculties that perceive, that allow our mind to perceive our higher true self. So Om is the cosmic sound of creation, helps us return to our essence in communion with spirit and the eternal self within. And so when we chant Hari Om, it also helps just circulate the energy through the nadis in this soothing and enlivening way. So we'll chant this Hari Om 3 times. And in the full Udgit practice, you do a head movement with it, which helps activate different marmani or marma points in the body that opens these gateways more. It has pretty much the same contraindications, or you shouldn't do it because of the same list as earlier. But to keep it simple in these classes, I want to just invite you to just chant the mantra and practice it together so that you have one mantra practice that you can take into your day-to-day life and bring that into your nervous system regulation, into your spiritual practice, and into the setting the stage for your day and your being to feel safe, grounded, and connected to true self, which is the most important foundation to doing any kind of emotional healing work or re-regulating or balancing work. So to practice this mantra breath, I'll just type it in the chat. Hari Om, Hariom. And let's begin. So we'll do mantra breath and then the contemplative meditation poem for today. And then we'll just take a moment of pause and get into our teaching. So first begin by exhaling all the air out. And then take a full deep 3-part breath in and exhale with Hari Om. Hari Pause and notice. Pujana mana pushpadya yamati kriyate drita nirvikalpe mahavyam nisa pujahi araralaya pujana mana pushpadya yamati kriyate drita nirvikalpe mahavyam nisa pujahi araralaya. Worship does not mean offering flowers. It means offering your heart to the vast mystery of the universe. It means letting your heart pulse with the life of the universe without thought and without reservation. It means being so in love that you are willing to dissolve and be recreated in every moment. So leading into today's class was the idea of this analogy of an emotional thermostat. So we have an emotional kind of thermostat that's not just neurochemical, but we could think about it for a moment as neurochemical, that when we have too many feel-good hormones and running through our bloodstream for a little too long and we're feeling a little too peaceful, calm, things are going, well, a little too much joy, a little too much contentment or happiness. Just like when it gets too hot, the AC kicks in and it cools us down. And when it gets too cold, the heat kicks on and warms us up. So in that way, our body kind of has this like internal mechanism that's like usually conditioned from childhood. If you were a little too loud, a little too shiny, a little too bright, someone came and, quieted you down, stuffed you up, repressed your voice or your expression, or told you that you were being too much, or told you that you were being, too annoying, or that you weren't good enough, or that it wasn't, whatever. So part of that conditioning brings you, so when you start to feel a little too expressed or a little too joyful or a little too loving, same thing goes for affection, right? If I only received a certain amount of attention or affection from my caregivers as a child. Well, when in my close relationships, friendships, or intimate relationships, when we get a little too close, or we are a little too intimate, or I feel a little too vulnerable, there's like a withdrawal that can happen. That's kind of all part of the emotional thermostat phenomenon. There's like a withdrawal, or something unconsciously comes up inside of you to sabotage the closeness, to withdraw, to push away, because your being, your this lower nature part of ourself that is made up of the elements and our physical body, and the mind and emotions and physical body are all part of what we call the lower nature. They're made up of elements, and they are physical, tangible things, even the mind and emotions, even though we think of them as energetic things. But energetic things are still physical things, like more tangible. So we have these set points that it kind of cools us off. It brings us back down into, whatever we believe, whatever is kind of inherent in our self-worth or in our just comfort. And then the same thing goes for, you have a set point as well. Like if you get a little too down and out for too long, if you feel a little too depressed or self-loathing, if you feel a little too confused or, hard on yourself or critical or frustrated or whatever it is, stuck, there will be a point that you're like, I gotta shake this off. I'm better than this. We can do this. I can break that up, and I need to, cheer myself up, or I know I need to go go to a yoga class, or I need to go work out, or I need to go dance, or I need to do something that like shakes up that energy and gets you in a good mood, right? So your set points work both ways, but you have a range of a comfort zone that you're used to. And that comfort zone could be, down here with lower emotions, that like the troubled spirit who, no matter what great goodness is going on around, they're always troubled. That's a set point. That's in a certain position, maybe on a spectrum of feelings, possible feelings and experiences in life. Or someone who's very optimistic and always hopeful, like they might have a set point that's on a different part of that spectrum. So you kind of talking about it right now as we start to explore this concept and this idea, start to feel like, oh, where your spectrum is, where's my range within this spectrum. And part of when there's like, because we talk in this class like a lot about trauma or emotional pain imprints and things like that. When there's like an acute trauma or a traumatic experience, particularly in childhood during those developmental years, it creates a pattern, or a samskara, as we call it yoga and Ayurveda. It creates this habituated pattern of being that is part of that set point. So even if your set point is generally pretty feeling good, optimistic, all of that, there's like this hidden little thing that gets triggered, and it just instantly pulls us down into, say, shame or guilt. And part of like really starting to understand the mechanisms, or to reform our experience and our behaviors and actions associated with all of this, meaning part of finding a healing path within this realm is self-study, is cultivating self-awareness. And in the yoga system, we call this svadhyaya, where we are internally reflecting as we move throughout the world. We're not trying to identify with these experiences, meaning you're never trying to identify with these experiences. But when you feel hurt or someone pisses you off, you're like, I'm pissed off. Like, you did this. There's like an immediate reactionary experience that happens inside that is a reflex. It becomes a reflex. So these triggers or imprints or set points become reflexive, and we don't even know that they're happening. But we do know on some conscious level, we're here studying this topic. We know that something is off. We know that if something is wrong. We know that we want something more, better, more aligned. We know that we want to feel more in tune with our spirit and with our true path in life. So there's some pull there consciously where like something's not working, but we haven't yet like seen what's in our blind spot. And one of the things that resides in the blind spot is this mechanism of like the internal thermostat. And so there are ways to actually support you creating a set point that is actually more conducive and supportive to you in your life, and you being who you came here to this earth to become, and you being that with no resistance in your being. So if you're like, I know I want a healthy relationship with someone, but you've had significant experiences in the past of abusive relationships or just heartbreak and relationships not working out, or the same kind of pattern showing up in dynamics with this person, right? You're like, oh, I want a healthy relationship and I don't know how to get there, how to create that. There's a stretching. I want to be able to feel more love, self-worth, intimacy, connection, and I don't want to be, accepting crumbs from someone, as an example, right? And then when it comes to health, this is a big one, and this is like the main thing that we talk about in these workshops, or that we do through the practice of Ayurveda as a medical system, is we look at, okay, the physical body is a crystallization of the mind, and in mind we include emotions. The physical body is a crystallization of mind. So in Ayurveda and Ayurvedic psychology, the body is a crystallization of the mind from this life, deep-seated tendencies that were cultivated in early childhood, particularly the first 7 years of life, says Ayurveda, but also beyond in the developmental years. And deep-seated tendencies carried pre-birth from previous lifetimes. So your physical body in this lifetime is a crystallization of those deep-seated mental tendencies and sanskaras from previous lifetimes, and that are continued to be forged in childhood, that are now manifesting as the exact health experience that you're having in this body today. And so when you go to see an Ayurvedic physician or an Ayurvedic practitioner, it is required that they support you beyond just the physical. It's more than just the physical. It has to go into this transformation and reprocessing and healing of the mental emotional complex, because it is that interwoven. And the mind is also a reflection of the body's experience, because the body is literally in this life experiencing the world. And how do you experience the world? You experience the world through your five senses, through what you see, the visual impressions that you take in, through what you smell, through what you taste, through what you touch, and through what you hear. So the mind, and therefore the body, are a storehouse of impressions. And then through this faculty of your buddhi is the buddhi is, we'll loosely define it for now. In previous talks, we've talked much more in depth about it. But your buddhi is your ability to see reality as it is, and it's how you interpret these impressions that come in. But before your buddhi is properly formed, when you're in childhood, you're using the buddhi of the adults around you, meaning you're using the intellect and the reasoning abilities and the responsiveness. Like, you're using the buddhis, your buddhi is being trained by the caretakers around you. So that is usually a problem because we weren't all raised in the most enlightened of environments, right? So we have to now we need to form our own buddhi and try to see reality as it is. But we don't see reality as it is. We don't see reality as a matter of fact. We don't see the world as just pure experience or information. It's all tainted by these veils that have been created, the veils in front of the buddhi that kind of distort our ability to see reality as it is. And so part of the purification process is lifting the veils and clearing the distortion so we can actually just see the clarity of what is. But those veils are in our soma. They're in our body. They're not just in the mind. I can't just think my way through trauma. I can't just do talk therapy and think that everything's going to get worked out just because I tell my story. There are imprints that are in the recesses of your subconscious mind that you're not even aware of, and those imprints live in your physical body. And I'll share with you just from my personal experience that I had a lot of traumas in those developmental years in childhood that I don't remember visually. I can't even tell you the story. I heard about the story later on in life, but my body remembered all these things, and my body was constantly triggered, and I didn't know why, and I thought I was crazy for many years until I finally found Ayurveda and yoga and learned these practices of svadhyaya so I can start to watch myself. And so I had a lot of healing support to learn how to support these imprints and rewire the nervous systems and the body's experience from triggers. So now those triggers no longer hijack the whole system, but rather there's just a healthy engagement in the ways that used to be triggering. So I hope you can relate to some of what I'm saying, because it's a little bit conceptual at this point.
Can I say something?
Yes, please, Teresa.
Yeah, I do relate. And then I was thinking of two different things that I would like to introduce to what you were saying. One is that while you are developing in the womb, all the I don't know exactly where you would put that, if it's a third category or if it would be kind of past life things or it's a sensory things. Your senses are not fully developed, so you're kind of borrowing your mom's, but that means that also all the emotions, the thoughts, the tendencies that she's having during pregnancy and the events that happen to her, the posture that she gets, how she contracts when something is scaring her, or the opposite, or if she's having the most relaxed and easy, luxurious pregnancy, it's going to be part of you. Your perception of the life you're coming through starts there. And the other thing is that, yeah, I totally relate to the fact that we cannot just talk through or think about that wishful thinking. And there's a lot of that in the spiritual. I mean, we're all trying to search. We can feel the triggered alarms of something's not completely there, and we're trying to find our ways through it. But just pretending that because we want to, and just making that intention might not be enough, because the imprints are stronger than we can even imagine. And so practice sadhana, and then it depends on the person. It can be completely different things. Helps, as you said, to, from my personal experience, is kind of suddenly you are watching it from a perspective that allows you to contemplate, and from there things start just to fit in on their own, more than you doing something. You cannot do something about something you don't really know what it is, but it's that trusting that it will show in front of you. And I know it sounds like wishful thinking, but it is not. I don't know if it makes any sense. Thank you.
Such a gorgeous reflection and reminders. Like, truly, that is, it really landed what you said about the womb and experiencing, because you don't have, just like we borrow the buddhi of our caretakers while we're growing up, we're borrowing the buddhi and the senses of mom when we're in utero, which is just so profound. And yeah, and we know one place that we can look when we're like, wait, whose is this? Like, what am I whose thought is that, or whose feeling is that, or whose tendency is that? Like, what is that? Oh, it's not even mine. Like, okay, now I can start to reform once something comes into my conscious awareness. But it's wild. It's wild, these bodies and emotions. Thank you for chiming in. I love it. So now this kind of brings us to, like, well, where do we go from there? And like, where does the reform or the repatterning or the transformation really come from? So it's completely limited. Let me tell you where it doesn't come from. It does not come from the mind. It is completely limited to think that we can just treat this body-mind complex to heal trauma or to change our our physical, mental, emotional experience. We can use some willpower, but if we, to a period of time, but it's non-sustainable because of our identity. So our identity dictates the center point from which we experience all of life. And if I stand here and I believe my identity is these emotions, then when I'm angry, I say, I am angry. Literally, you're saying, I am anger. If I'm feeling sad, then I identify, I am sad. Literally, I'm saying, I am sadness. And in that moment, you are, because you're riding the waves and you are becoming different things all the time. And how can you create any kind of stability if you are this massively changing thing all the time? Instead, we shift the perspective and the central point of, and we reinforce this because it's the higher truth. So for this, we just need to make a distinction between our higher nature and our lower nature. And I really need to say this first, is that higher and lower does not mean better than, less than, good, bad. Please do not listen to what I'm about to say through those limited lenses. So higher nature, lower nature is just referring to, the best we can in English, to the parts of us that are eternal and beyond the fluctuations of nature, or the lower nature, which is simply the realm of prakriti, which is nature, which is the physical manifestation of nature. This is our full body mind complex, which are physical, changeable things, right? We are connected to nature. I'm pointing to my window as I say nature because I'm looking outside at the hillsides and the trees and the gardens. They go through massive changes constantly, seasons of birth in the springtime, of fruiting, of coming into fruition through the middle of their life, and then they go to through a death cycle where the flower wilts, it fruits, and then it goes to seed, and then the plant dies, and everything goes back to the earth. This is the cycle of nature. These are the cycles of our life. They happen with every single breath. They happen inside of every single cell in our body. They happen through every single day as the earth spins and the sun moves throughout the sky from your perception, and the sun rises and sets at night, and we transition from day to night. It happens every single day. It happens every single month as the moon goes through its lunar cycles. Every single day the moon looks different. There's a different face, a different notch of the moon, a different reflection of the light. Every single day it changes. It goes from full moon and full bright expression to completely dark, dark moon and darkness, withdrawing of the light. And then the whole same thing goes through the whole seasons of spring, summer, fall, winter. And then we go through those same seasons in our human lifespan, from birth to adulthood, to our elderly years, to our bodies returning to the earth. So it's beautiful, and it's constantly in movement. It's constantly in change. It's constantly in fluctuation. The only constant in material life are these fluctuations of change and cycles and seasons. Now we need to know this. We need to study this in depth. We need to understand how our physical, mental, emotional bodies are connected to this. This is one of the ways we actually create some level of stability in the system, is to honor the lower nature. We are embodied beings, so we need to honor this lower nature. We need to feed our body we need to know our unique constitution. We need to feed our body. We need to move our body. We need to rest our body. We need to, all these things to take care of our physical vehicles. And we simultaneously need to realize that we are not the lower nature of these fluctuations. As much as we need to learn about them and on a single day throughout our practices of eating and sleeping and rest and exercise and all the things that we do to maintain health, that these fluctuations are inherently limited because they all come to an end. And so in Ayurvedic psychology, the most important piece is the distinction and the remembrance of our higher nature. And so our higher nature simply is the indwelling soul or spirit within you. It's inside of you and it's outside of you. It has form and it's formless. And we won't get into all those philosophical aspects in this moment, but regardless of what your spiritual beliefs are, for those of you in this workshop and listening to this recording, there is an inherent need around connecting with this divine part of you, this holy, sacred, eternally true, eternally present part of you. And this is your higher nature. Because it's eternal, it is completely stable. So it's the only thing that's actually stable. So when we can shift our center from the consciously anxious-ridden fluctuations and changes of emotions, of physical, tangible things coming in and out of our life, people coming in and out of our life, cycles of life and chapters of life changing, the movie screen of our life going through its drama of the theater of, devastation, heartbreak, joy, exhilaration, and bliss, like all of these fluctuations, if we identify with the roller coaster of all of that, it's crazy making and it's devastating. And we believe that we're in the movie and that we are the characters. But what if you were actually the one sitting in the seat of the movie theater watching the movie on the screen? When the movie ends and you go to a movie theater or watch a movie in your home, when the movie ends, do you realize, you look down at your hands that have been eating popcorn and drinking drinks? You're like, oh, here's my, I'm this being, not the being on the screen, right? So in the same way, there's a remembrance of like, oh, I'm actually not even this body. I'm not this outfit. My soul is eternal and it will go beyond this particular outfit it's put on for today. It is the one watching this movie on the movie screen of my life that I'm living at this moment. So this concept of higher nature, connecting with the divine part of you, connecting with the true eternal self, is the keystone, center point, foundation of healing trauma and of regulating the nervous system and of creating a healthy body-mind complex, because it's only through the eternal soul and spirit that we can actually rewrite and put into appropriate context, see reality as it is, and come out of darkness into light, so to speak, overcome our blind spots and move into illuminated ways of thinking and being. And so there's a beautiful we did this in our last session last month. So if you go back in the YouTube channel and look for the July 2022 version, we went through 3 mantras. Excuse me. 3 mantras that we sang to connect to these concepts on a deep vibrational energetic level. So please go back and listen to those and practice those every day, because it really connects. They're not say religious mantras in any way. So whatever your beliefs are, these are beautiful mantras that just help you connect with the essence of what we're speaking of here. And the beautiful thing about mantra is that manas, your mind, the man in mantra, it's a tool for the mind. So tra is relating to trayati, or the tool, something that's useful and supportive for the mind. So mantra are tools for the mind. And the mind, as I was talking to a client the other day, and we were talking about this witness consciousness. And so it's like you're standing here as true self, but these trains, it's like you're standing at the train station, and these wild trains are just coming your way constantly. Just these are thought trains. So the trains are thoughts, and they're different voices in your head that are like swooping in, and they want to take you for a ride. And this is where the identity piece comes in, is like you, most of the time, unconsciously are just flinging your awareness from one train to another train to another train to another train. Meaning you have a thought, it comes into your awareness, say a worry. And then that worry goes, oh, what if this happens? Oh my God, then what could I do? Okay, well, if that happens, then I can do this. And then, oh my gosh, but what if this happens and that happens? And then, so it's like this runaway train, right, of worry and fear and anxiety, and it's just going all over the place. You jumped on the train because you started engaging with the thought. The thought came in, and you had another thought, and then another one, all about that topic. And then you went on a wild ride. And when you go on that wild ride, it literally releases the associated hormones and neurotransmitters in your bloodstream that give you the whole body experience of all of those things that you're worrying about. So your body experiences as if they're all happening, because your physical body doesn't know the difference. It's following the thoughts. It's following where your attention goes, your prana, your life energy flows, and then your body experiences. So when there's high levels of stress all the time, like your body thinks it's an emergency all the time, right? So don't get on the train. Because if you could use your mind in a more productive way, one that actually regulates your hormones, one that actually regulates your nervous system, one that actually helps you identify with something that's eternally stable, profoundly comforting, loving, true, beyond the what we call the dream of this world, which is a whole nother concept we won't get into today. But how calming, like how much more chill are my neurochemicals, my physiology, if I'm able to identify with something that's actually unchanging. So this is the tools. These are the tools for the mind, the mantra. So we do breathwork practices, the ones that you did in the beginning of class today. You do these breathwork practices every single morning before you look at your phone, open your email, before you start talking to anyone. You do them first thing, because the early morning of your day is the microcosm to the macrocosm of the early childhood of your life in utero. Like that early morning just before sunrise is the in utero time. And then just after sunrise into the morning, this is childhood time. So all the cycles are microcosm, macrocosm of your life. So it's particularly if you want to rewrite early childhood imprints or in utero imprints, it's pre-sunrise, sunrise, and post-sunrise. First thing in the morning before your mind engages with anything else and just starts, taking you on all these mental train rides. So use mantra, use the pranayama to create pathways in your body of harmony and of connection to higher self, to spirit, to your higher nature. I see. I thought I saw someone in the chat. Thank you, Maria. All right, so checking my notes. Okay, so next concept is in Ayurveda is that we started speaking to this a little bit, but that the body is a mental organism. The mind is not in your brain. Yes, there are brain functions that connect to your experience of mind, but mind is in the body. So the whole body is a mental organism and is a vehicle of perception. So your whole body is a vehicle of perception. So any breakdown in your bodily functions, any ill health, development of dis-ease, imbalance, emotional triggers, low emotional states that are unsupportive to your life and to you being who you're here to be. Any breakdown of the functions has its root in the process of perception and results. So the process of perception, so we'll talk about that in a second. What does that mean? The process of perception. So any breakdown in your bodily functioning, body, mind, emotional functioning, has its root in the way that you're perceiving the world, and it results from the wrong use of your senses. It results from the wrong use of your senses. So your senses, let me go into more what is wrong use of the senses. So your senses in Ayurveda, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, everything that Shabda, the sound, Shabda, Rasa, Shabda, Sparsha, touch, Rupa, sight, Rasa, taste, Gandha, smell. So everything, these are the 5 lenses of perception, the ways that you perceive the world. Now, the problems that you're having in your physical body, mind, and emotions all stem from the way you're using your senses and the way that you're perceiving the world, your process of perception. So the ways that you use the senses improperly are by overusing them, underusing them, or just straight up misusing them. And if you overuse the senses, underuse the senses, misuse the senses in some way, what it does, it ends up, you take a resulting action that is the wrong action, the unaligned action. You take an action that is more rajasic or more tamasic. And didn't we go into the 3 gunas last month's class? Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. I think we touched upon them, but I don't think we have that as a shared deep language of understanding. So I'll explain what those mean in just a second. But if you misperceive, basically what it comes down to, if you misperceive through your senses, misperceive life, you're not able to see reality as it is because there's some kind of imprint or distortion due to the overuse, underuse, or misuse of the senses, or perception flaw based on childhood imprints, all of that. It eventually causes causes you to act in a way that is unsupportive because you're using the wrong data coming in, so you react a certain way, if that makes sense. I get that this is conceptual. I hope that makes sense. So when I say Rajasic and Tamasic or Sattvic, these are the 3 subtle elements. So we've talked a bit in these classes about like the main 5 elements that make up our physical body and that make up nature. Most of you have heard these before: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Kind of come in, and those 5 combine into 3 in the body, these functional units of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, the principle of movement, the principle of transformational fire, digestion, metabolism, and then the principle of structure and lubrication in the body. So these are the biological humors that all work together in your psychophysiological makeup that allow you to, that basically make up who you are in your lower nature, in Prakriti. And everyone has a unique combination of all of these elements that make them who they are, that make your diet more personalized to you in this way versus another person, right? Like there are things that work for you that don't work for other people. There are ways that you experience life and the world that are different. So there can be a dozen people in one place watching the same thing on the movie screen or in front of you, and every single one of those 12 people will have a completely different experience of the thing that they're watching. And one of those reasons is because they have different constitutional makeups and also different ways that they perceive through the 5 senses. But there's also these subtle qualities, or these subtle gunas, these subtle elements that make up our psyche, and we usually use these terms a little bit more in relationship to the mental emotional aspect of ourselves, which is sattva, rajas, and tamas. And in Ayurveda, these are called the mahagunas. Mahagunas. So they're the main primary gunas. I'm just going to type them in the chat, just so you have. Sorry for those of you in the recording, and I'm not going to have everything typed up underneath. But this is just for your ongoing study. and understanding of some foreign words that I might be speaking that you haven't heard of before. But rajas, so sattva, I mentioned this in the email as well. Sattva is, in essence, it's the principle of harmony. So there's a harmonious flow. There's still fluctuation and change, but it's the most peaceful and content and harmonious flow that you would be experiencing in your mind. So there's an experience in the mind, and then that turns into an action or behavior, right? So there's a perception. When you're having sattvic perception, there's a neutrality, there's an acceptance, an openness, a curiosity, an ease, a compassion for whatever it is that you're perceiving. And then as you perceive, you perceive these things from like a very neutral, accepting, compassionate, curious, open standpoint, and you then act in a way that is just pretty matter of fact, appropriate. You're responding with deliberateness to the world around you in a very equanimous kind of way. So in an appropriate response for what's happening. Okay, so then the next perception, so rajas. Rajas is kinetic energy, it's energy and movement. And in the mind, mental emotional complex, or in the energetic of the mind body complex, it is the energy of agitation and ambition. And rajas is something that compels us to shake things up and change and do and be and do and have more, more, more. It's also it's the part of us that's ambitious. It's the part of us that's doing. And it's the part of us that's excitable. And it's the part of us that it's the energetic that keeps us burning the midnight oil, overdoing, right? Like in excess, it can create over ambition and doing and identification with status and all of these types of things. But it's a kinetic energy and an agitation in the system. So it's an excitability. So as that, because that's there in the mind, it then translates to an action or behavior, which is reactive versus the sattvic, like responding appropriately. It's just like an immediate reactiveness. It's like, I'm across the room doing something completely different, but I have this distortion of being a people pleaser, and someone says they need something on the other side of the room. Before I can even finish my sentence, I am jumped out of my seat and I've run across the room and I've taken care of the thing, right? Like that's like, it would be like an energetic rajasic thing. Or it's like a habitual, it rajas would be the source of like many addictive type behaviors, even the ones of scrolling and on the internet, or just scrolling on apps, like always playing games or always going to just more stimulation. So rajas wants more stimulation constantly, and then it impels our behaviors to be very unconscious, but it's reflexive, it's reactive, it's quick, it's fast, and it's a little bit out of body at times. Does that make sense? And then this concept of tamas. So tamas is in opposition to rajas in that it's inertia. So where rajas is kinetic energy and agitation, tamas is inertia, dullness, and ignorance. So it is literally, tamas is our blind spot. It's the things that are buried that we're completely unaware of. And so it creates an unconscious movement. It's like an aloofness to, we can't even see reality as it is, right? Because we hold a perspective that we don't even know we have. We hold an unconscious bias, an unconscious, even this can be even an unconscious racism, or different types of things that are just like, we have this lens that we don't even know we have because it's like in our body or it's in our blind spot. These are tamas. So anything that you're unaware of in terms of your actions, behaviors, and feelings. Also, when someone has a trauma response and they go numb, or they go into like a total, actually any of their habitual patterns of fight, flight, freeze, or fawning, they're all kind of buried in tamas, because it is the active expression of maybe fight or flight would be rajasic, but the frozen ones, or the unconscious patterns of like, wow, I don't even realize that I'm going into this pattern, or that I'm having this internal experience, that would all be under the realm of tamasic. Now, some of you might be hearing these terms, and these are really just terms that are non-translatable into English. So we need to learn these terms. If we're going to talk about Ayurvedic psychology, we need to understand these concepts, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And I will, continually teach, speak to them throughout. But try to familiarize yourself with these concepts, because they become very, very important and supportive as we work with them in like an Ayurvedic psychology counseling process, in a therapeutic process for actually transforming and changing whatever the internal experience is, or the health experience that you're trying to heal. They become really important in that way. One other lens that you can look at the rajas and tamas and sattva through would be like yin and yang. So where yin would be more tamasic and yang would be more rajasic, or solar and lunar, where solar is more rajasic, lunar is more tamasic. So again, removing any labels of like good, bad, right, wrong. In the mind, we're looking at these energies of rajas and tamas. There are appropriate applications of rajas and tamas, such as it's time to wake up in the morning and do stuff. Like, you got to use some rajas because you're becoming active. When you want to go to sleep at night, you want to actually utilize tamas, because it helps you ground and relax and turn your energy within and rest at night. So rajas and tamas aren't bad and sattva is good. It's just there are three different energies that are, these are lens that we can look at the mind and your mental tendencies, mental emotional tendencies. And ultimately, we do want to strive to have right relationship with each one. So if we are if we are very tamasic and we're stuck in a pattern of unconscious, buried, reflexive behaviors, or complete unawareness of, a traumatic imprint or something that needs to be faced or healed or moved through, then we actually want to use rajas to therapeutically work with tamas and help break up that stagnation, so to speak, of whatever's buried under the surface for you. So the therapeutic use of rajas to help break up tamas is very supportive, because it helps you move towards sattva, or that is sattvic. Using rajas, when the rajasic energy, when rajas is appropriate, is sattvic. That's creating harmony. In the same way, utilizing tamas when tamas is appropriate is sattvic. So there are, many different ways to like start to wrap our mind around and understand and embrace and work with these concepts. But I want to tie it back into the senses, because we talked about the overuse, the underuse, and the misuse of the senses. Now, in general, in society today, most people are overusing the senses in rajasic stimulation, and they're underusing the senses in wholesome ways that actually feed your senses. So you don't only feed your body with food. You don't only feed your body with food. You don't only nourish your being through eating. You nourish it through the senses. You are digesting everything you see taste, touch, smell, and hear. You're digesting. We talked about this during the Agni module, or workshop several months ago, when we talked about optimizing the digestion, is that your Agni, or digestive fire, becomes suppressed and depressed when you are overwhelmed with sensory information that you're trying to digest, and you don't have any digestive power left for your food. So you develop food allergies and food sensitivities and all kinds of things that you now can't eat. That also connects in with ama, the level of ama or toxicity in your body, because when you have a low Agni, you end up accumulating substance in your body that's unsupportive to health, and that manifests into disease through 6 phases. But we need to talk about the senses now. So in the same way that if you have a lot of ama or toxicity, or your body needs a cleanse, your mind, emotions, and senses, your energetic self needs a cleanse. So if you're living a stressful existence, or experiencing a lot of stress, anxiety, triggers, hypersensitivity to the world around you, overwhelming emotions, or totally checked out, numbed out in any way, if you're experiencing chronic illness, all long standing health situations like chronic pain, chronic illness, long standing autoimmune or chronic inflammatory conditions, all of these kinds of conditions in the body all have a root in the mind. The mind aspect has to be healed in order for those conditions to be fully reversed. Acute health crises and acute pathogenic illnesses, those can be healed just on the physical level. But anything that continues 3 months or beyond is considered chronic, and they're, for years especially, these all have a connection to the mind. It's not only in the mind, but they all have connection in the mind, according to Ayurveda. So we have to then look at not only detoxifying the physical body, but going through a process of purification in the mental, emotional level. And in order to do that, we need to stop overfeeding our senses. Just in the way that you might need to do a fast or go on a strict diet to cleanse your physical body and detoxify, you need to do that with the senses. So you're not overusing them and you're not under-engaging them. So the underuse or the under-engaging them comes from not feeding them wholesome imprints through the 5 senses. So you end up misusing them altogether. So a great example of this that I recommend to a lot of people very highly who are trying to work with doing a mental emotional detox, so to speak, is actually Vipassana meditation. Because Vipassana meditation, which is essentially a Buddhist meditation, very specific practice of meditation, but they have very much systematized it in a very beautiful, accessible way. And there are donation-based centers all over the world that you can go to have a 10-day immersion in a silent meditation retreat. And this is like one of the best ways to do a fast for your senses. Now, you can still do it at home, not having to go to a retreat center for 10 days in silence, but I'm using this as a more extreme example. If you want, so in the physical body, if you want toxins to leave and you want to cleanse the body, you need to stop putting toxins in, and then you need to, when you stop putting them in, it allows the stuff that's been under the surface to kind of come back to what we call the central channel of the body, the digestion, the gut, so that we can then cleanse it out. The way it works in the mind and emotions is you stop bringing sensory input in. You stop reading, you stop scrolling, you stop talking, you stop engaging with all the conversations, every single conversation with every single person you have every day, every thought you think, every thought train you go on, every post of the millions of posts you see on social media, every email, every TV imprint, every radio song station, the music that's on in the background of your house, like all of it is constantly bombarding your senses and it's making an imprint and an imprint on you. And so to reduce as many of those as possible, or let alone fast from all of those impressions, actually allows whatever needs to be healed under the surface to come up and to leave. But if you don't stop putting stuff in, it's very hard to release that stuff that's under the surface out. Feel it, process it through, reprocess it, repattern it, all of that. So in Ayurveda, it doesn't have to be as extreme as a Vipassana meditation retreat, 10-day silent meditation retreat. But I use that as an example because they've codified it and like systematized it step by step. Each day there's a discourse and you're meditating every single day in silence. And for me, it was like the first experience, like I did it over a decade ago, but it was like the first experience that I had of like really having spaciousness, of just being. And it was so blissful. After the first 3 days, you get over this hump, which is like when you're fasting. And it's like there's agitation in the system. It's rajas and tamas leaving the system because you're not putting any of that other food in. So you get over the hump, and then the rest, it feels like a month of bliss. It's seven more days, and it's just like the most spacious, present, like blissful experience. So, but you can translate this to at home. Take 3 days. Some people, there are friends of ours who every single Sunday they take a vow of silence. They don't talk to anyone. They turn their phone off and they don't talk to anyone for an entire day. Can you do that even just for a few hours a week or a little bit of time every day, instead of the habituated patterns you have to like engage or to fill your senses with something that's really just like some kind of distraction? Or when you are filling your senses, filling them with something that connects you to your higher nature instead of keeping you down in the lower nature of fluctuating emotions and the drama of life. Can you do something that helps you connect? And this is why I always suggest mantra. So you can practice the Hari Om chant. You can sing the mantras that we did last month. They're so profound and transformational. And it gives your senses, it feeds your senses the proper food, especially because you're engaging with a vibration that is aligned with your true self, with your eternal self. And you are making the sound of it and you are hearing it simultaneously. So it's this combination that is just so, so, so effective and meaningful. So I can't stress it enough. Practice the mantra practice. Sing the mantras every day. All right, checking my notes once more. Any questions so far? I think we covered just about everything I wanted to share today, so we can start to wrap up. Okay, let me wrap up with some really practical things, kind of tying in tying in all the concepts that we shared today. So I want to give you like a list of practices that you can draw upon. These are kind of concepts and you'll be able to use them. They're not like guided practices. They're perspectives and concepts. So you can utilize these tools. These are just going to be tools that you can use very practically as you navigate your day to day. Come back to these tools as much as possible. So the first one we already said, but write this in your notes in big letters as like a bullet pointed list. Do not get on the train. Do not get on the trains. Meaning, remember we said that analogy of like the trains, all the thought trains that come across your awareness. Don't get on them. Don't go where they want to take you. Stay in that witness consciousness. Watch the train go by and don't engage it. This is one way to start to repattern the mind. Don't get on the train. So on your next bullet point, you can also write this as a separate point, increase witness consciousness. So Dr. Ladd used to say, there's a double-pointed arrow. So under increase witness consciousness, right? Double-pointed arrow. Every time I'm looking at something, criticizing, saying something about something outside of me that's going wrong or anything, there's another finger, another arrow pointing back at myself. This, just understand, like whatever you're projecting outward is also projecting inward. Meaning this helps you stay in a witness consciousness. Because it's actually following a thought train to believe the thing that you are just reflexively saying externally to you. And instead, look back within, come back to your core, come back to your center. Next practice I call emotional blooming. So put this on your next bullet point. Emotional blooming. When you do have a genuine emotion. So we cultivate witness consciousness. We try to connect more and identify more with the true self, which is the eternal part of us, and create from that place right relationship with our lower nature and with the parts of ourselves that are the ones doing all the talking voices in our heads, right? There's lots of different parts of us that are having different opinions, different experiences, that had different imprints, that had, different hurts, different joys, different dreams and aspirations, different pains. There are also parts that have protective mechanisms that are trying to prevent you from moving forward in your life the way that you think you want to, and they're holding you back because they don't want you to get hurt. All these different parts are talking, and they're all usually talking over each other at the same time. And so, but these parts are to be honored, and they have emotions. So I guess I kind of went into a different practice before emotional blooming, but this kind of does come first. So just put the next bullet that says create space between true self and lower nature parts. Create space between true self and lower nature parts. So meaning there's a distinction between higher nature and lower nature. And I'm cultivating my higher self, true self, through daily practice, sadhana practice. Also, like Teresa said, sadhana is spiritual practice. And like we talked about earlier, first thing in the morning, I'm doing my pranayama and mantra repetition. And this is going to help me connect to true self. So creating a distinction between higher nature and lower nature can be this bullet. This is just something to always keep in your awareness. Actually, maybe the next class we can talk more about that. Like how to actually do that. That would be a good next class. Let me make a note. Or just how to know. Did we talk about that already? How to know how to know when I'm in true self, in my higher nature versus my lower nature. Sheila asks, what do you mean by space? When I say space, I mean like most of the time our identity is with our lower nature, meaning we're blended with our lower nature, and we have a conscious and unconscious belief that we are these bodies, we are these emotions, this person is hurting me, this situation is wrong, bad, unsupportive for my life, right? Like there's like a constant merging and blending of the identification with the lower nature aspect of ourselves. So when I say create space, I'm talking about cultivating your true self, cultivating your higher self, your connection to your core, your connection to your center, your connection to your soul, your spirit, the divine indwelling, connecting to your higher nature. And when you identify more with your higher nature, it creates space between your true self and your lower nature, the parts of you that have emotions that are going through this, human experience of fluctuations and all that. So it's just creating space, meaning if I can be established in myself, my true self, then I can witness these fluctuations of emotions that are constantly changing, and the parts of me that are going through pain. So it's like the distinction is I have a mind, I'm not the mind. That's space, because I'm creating space in my identity to be identified with something that's eternal and true, and I have a mind that I can use all of its faculties. Or I'm not angry, but a part of me is experiencing anger, and that experience might express through me, but it's a perceptual spaciousness that you're having that allows you to not be overtaken as much by the emotional experience. So rather than I am anger or I am sad, it's, oh, this part of me, this part of my lower nature is really sad and is going through this experience. And it might experience its sadness through me, but I am not it. Does that make sense, Sheila? It's a concept for you all to keep in mind right now, and it's a complete lifelong practice. So um, so then getting back to the emotional blooming, so there's a practice with, we already said daily practices, spiritual practice, establishing pranayama, mantra, all of that first thing in the morning, and then often throughout the day as well. If you can do it 3 times a day, that would be most ideal. So just even like 10 minutes before each meal, for example, you just sit and do a round of humming breath and Hari Om. Beautiful. Perfect. Do that. It's like taking pills 3 times a day. I need to take these pills 3 times a day because this is what the doctor told me. Instead, I'm taking this vibrational pill of mantra 3 times a day because it's going to help me connect. It's what my soul's telling me to do, and puts the soul more in charge. So we want the soul, your spirit, eternal spirit, to be in charge, not the mind to be in the charge. You need to train the mind to obey the soul, not the mind becomes the master and takes you on a ride. That's what I mean by space, and that's the distinction. So coming back to this emotional blooming technique is simply whenever you do have a genuine emotion that comes to the surface and needs to be released, you just let it flower. So emotional blooming is that you just let that flower come, like you just hold space for it. You can imagine that you're a parent holding your child as the child just needs to cry because they got an injury or something. You're just holding unconditional love, and it's just like, I know this will pass, but there's a holding in that. And you can imagine yourself being held by the divine, or you can be the one reparenting this hurt part of you or this angry part of you or whatever part of you is going through the emotion. But basically, you allow the emotion to come into full bloom like a flower. It will reach its peak of experience. And then inevitably, what happens is the petals fall away and the wave passes of that emotion. So, whatever emotion you have that does bubble to the surface, you can use this as a technique to, instead of repress it, instead of trying to change, your course or bypass it in some way, it's a technique to just be with it. You just watch it from witness consciousness. You just watch it bloom and wither and allow it to go through its cycle without any shame, without any guilt, without it meaning anything about you personally. It's just watching a flower bloom and go. That's all. So use that. And then, as much as you can, your next little bullet can just be sensory fasting or sensory detox, you can write. And just for as much time as you're able, or one arena that you reflexively, like if there's an app on your phone that you reflexively just use, see if you can turn it off, delete it for a little while. You can always reinstall the app. Like, just as much of a sensory detox as you're able to impart in your life. Consider where in your life you can stop overusing your senses, because these imprints and impressions are constantly forming. We don't want to borrow the buddhi of social media, right? We don't want to we want to cultivate our own buddhi. We can only cultivate our own buddhi if we're not getting these constant sensory impressions that we're being taken on those train rides. It's like our mind has enough train rides. We don't need to go on the train rides of, consumerism and marketing and other people's agendas of how life should, and impressions of how life should be. So just considering that. Sensory fast. Okay, there's so much more we could dive into today on this topic, but we'll wrap that up there. And Valerie, oh, I love the idea of sensory detox. Wonderful. Thank you for your kind words. You're very kind. And I appreciate you all being here. We'll wrap up with a simple prayer, sending out goodness and love, so that all beings on all levels of existence may also reconnect with the divine and remember who they really are, including all of you beautiful souls who are here. So if you know the prayer, you can sing it with me. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Radhika, it is nice to have you here. Thanks for joining in. I'm glad you liked the class. So wonderful to see all the new faces. And for those of you watching the recordings, we are all sending our love to you as well. So we'll chant 3 times and then Om Shanti and wrap up for this workshop for today. So taking a deep breath in and let it out. And then full breath in, chanting Loka Samasta 3 times. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Love and blessings to you all. Thanks for joining in. So wonderful to see you, Teresa. Thank you. Hari, Hari.
Thank you so much. I'm
Oh, thank you,
sorry.
Radhika.
Yeah,
Thank
because
you,
we're
Haribol.
Haribo.
I'm so happy that you're so familiar with the Indian culture, and it really makes me so proud.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for being here. Where do you live, Radhika?
I'm in Mumbai.
Beautiful. That's the only place I've actually visited and spent time in
Oh,
India.
please do visit, be my guest. I'd love to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, my first mentor was there in Mumbai. So many, many blessings. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. See you next month. First Wednesdays of every month, we're here live, and all the recordings will be sent to you if you're on the email. So make sure you register on the email if you're watching this as a recording, so you can also come to the live classes. Okay, and thank you,
Yes,
Sheila. Thank you, Sheila, for your kind words too, and good morning, good night, whatever time of day it is for everybody. Okay, bye bye.